Hello, I'm Ken Harris, and we're going to do a very easy little painting, a little building in it. The tools I'm using a very fine detail brush, a medium-sized knife, a fan brush, and the brush to do the main painting with, about 1.5 centimetres wide. I've put the horizon line about 1/3 of the way up, and the building will be about 1/3 of the way in. The sky is going to be pinkish in the lower sky, so I'm going to take a tiny bit of red. When you pick up red, pick it up with extreme care, because it will really take over your colour on you if you're not careful. Little red, and I'm going to add the tiniest little bit of orange so that it swings it slightly towards an apricot colour. Now, I do have a very thin coat of medium over the board, but I'm also going to pick up the tiniest bit on the brush and paint this lower sky. You'll notice that there's a little bit of yellow ochre coming off my brush here and there, but that doesn't matter. It's blending away beautifully. And you can just paint this board as if you're painting a house, but it's much better if you use somewhat of a crisscross stroke, and all of your brush strokes should be short, regardless of whether they're going across, up and down, or in a crisscross manner. It's much better to have them short. That's about what we want. The ground itself, while we've still got this colour toning on, the ground itself could be painted with a little yellow ochre, and it will dry a little bit and make it a lot easier to work when we get to doing the ground. So I'm going to run on just a thin coating of yellow ochre, again in just a very haphazard sort of manner. Don't worry about little bits of dark colour here and there and the ground going all over the place. And incidentally, there's a saying in painting that the stroke of the brush will determine the shape of the terrain, and I'll demonstrate that. If I got this brush with a little yellow ochre on it and stroked it up, it certainly looks like the ground is going up. And if you stroke it horizontally, obviously it looks as if it is going in a horizontal manner. That's important in many situations, to have the brush stroke going in the correct direction. Now, the upper sky, the top of the board, I'm going to just pick up this paint here and put it aside. Don't throw your little bits of paint away, because you may have occasion to use it later on. And I have a little blue and white there, but we do need more of it, so I'm going to mix some blue, and this is phthalo blue. I quite often use Prussian blue, but phthalo blue is satisfactory for this particular painting. And we need it reasonably dark at the top. Again, short strokes, run across the board in a crisscross sort of pattern, and don't load your brush again. Just let the brush run out. Just let the paint run out on your brush, and gently come down into this pink. You could in fact pick up a tiny little bit of white to make the paint spread a little better. This brush is a little bit hard and it's giving a few brush strokes, but it'll suffice. And just blend it away gently down here into the pinkish lower sky. It could be a tiny bit darker in this middle area here, but the darkest area that you need on a painting is always in the corners. Always try and get the corners a tiny bit darker than the rest of the painting, and that tends to make the viewer look into your painting, particularly if you have it in an exhibition somewhere. That's what you want, is the viewer to be looking into your painting and not tending to let their eyes drift out of the painting towards the competitions. After all, if you've got it in an exhibition, you want to sell it, and you should do everything you possibly can to get the viewers to look at your painting. All right, that's about what we want. Now, I'm going to run some clouds in there up into this sky, and I'm going to use a little bit of that pink to do that. I'm going to push off some highlights. Perhaps we could come down to the palette for a moment. I've got that paint fairly flat, that pinkish paint fairly flat. I'm going to push the brush into it so that we've got a little lump of paint on the end of the brush, and then you can push off this highlight at the top of the cloud and fuse it away gently, gently underneath. And by fusing it away gently underneath, it enables you to come in with another bank of clouds underneath, like so. And don't take it right across, because we have a tree on this side of the board. Now, there is a hill in the background, and I'm going to put the majority of that paint up the top of the palette, and just a little bit of paint and a little bit more white, and I'm going to run, I haven't got it marked in there, but we're going to run a hill in the distance here. Just run it away gently like so. Now, that's about the colour that we want, and I'm stroking it away at about a 45-degree angle, bringing it down to that house that's going to run in there. Now, if you want to make these other couple of hills look more distant, then it's advisable to mix just a tiny bit more white with it and make them lighter, and they will automatically start to look further away for you. And this guy here, just a tiny bit more white, so that he's just a paler blue in the distance, and that's about all we need. You can, of course, push this guy and make him just the tiniest bit darker if you want to, and you can separate these hills and have undulations and other little bits and pieces sticking up on them, but you've got to take into consideration what's in the foreground. You may end up doing a lot of work in getting texture into the hills, and then you find that you're going to put trees and things in front of it, and you lose all that work. So if it's possible to put texture into the hills, then that's great, but in this particular case we're going to have trees running along here, and we can't do that. Now, I'm going to wash the brush and thoroughly squeeze the turpentine out of the brush and put this blue paint up the top of the palette. And I'm going to take some orange and some Payne's grey. That is Rowney's orange and Rowney's chrome orange, it is, by the way. Chrome orange and Payne's grey. And I'm going to run some bushes in along here. This is a sort of an intermediate green. It's not a really dark green, but you get a wonderful green with orange and Payne's grey. And believe me, it is by far the easiest way to arrive at a nice green, just using orange and Payne's grey. run a few little branches, a few little holes for the birds to fly through, and we've got another little bush on this side of the house also. Could be just a whisker darker, that's about what we need. Now, a lot of people actually paint the little trunks and whatnot in like so with a small brush, but it's much easier to scratch them in. You're scratching back to the white board, and so easy to get the effect in, and that is all you really need. And then we'll come back with a little yellow green and highlight them. We'll assume the light is coming from the right in this particular case, and we'll just run these little bits of highlight in. Now, with this particular painting, you can use a variety of highlights. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of orange in there. You could use a little bit of burnt sienna, or you could use a little bit of Australian red gold. That's ideal also. The darker colours, they keep them towards the bottom. The lighter colours like yellow green, then obviously it's much more desirable to have them towards the top of the bushes, but there are branches that you can get to stand out a bit by simply highlighting them in a different colour. Now, we need to fuse away the bushes into the ground underneath them like so, and it's what you call grounding the bush. We're making the bush look as if it's joined to the ground. Very important. And we're going to run up a tree in this area here, about here. I'll run up some branches there. And I'm taking the brush through a 90-degree arc. I'm starting with the brush horizontal here, and I'm turning it around to a vertical position and just dragging the bristles lengthways. And that gives you a nice thin line. You see how you can run those lines away to the thickness of a hair. And it's being highlighted on the right-hand side of the tree, purely and simply because the ferrule is actually rubbing a bit of paint away. But we're going to go to a break, and when we come back we'll put the foliage on that, run the house in and do the ground and finish the painting off. So I'll see you after the break. Hi folks, I hope you've caught up and ready to go. I'm going to put the foliage on this tree, and I find that a bit of chrome orange, as we did before, and Payne's grey is the ideal way to go with that. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker than normal and run a little bit of foliage in here like so, and perhaps a little over here. Be careful not to come down too low and contaminate these guys down here. We don't want to do that. And perhaps a little bit in here. Now again, I'm going to highlight it with a little yellow green. You could use a tiny bit of cad yellow just to finish off the foliage on the extreme edge, but you only need a tiny bit added to the edge of it. And that's about all we really need in there. You can, if you wanted to really push the highlighting on the edge here, you could run up here with a little bit of highlight up the side, but I don't think that's necessary. You'll find that the ferrule itself will rub the surface off a tiny bit. Now I'm going to take a smaller knife to run the building itself in. The one I have there is just a shade too big, and the front of the building will be about there. The side of the building is going to run in around about there. And the roof itself is, it's great when you run out of tissues. The roof itself is going to be a little bit of yellow ochre, and you could have the tiniest bit of burnt sienna in it if you wanted to. And I'm going to get just a little bit of shade underneath this overlap of the roof here. And the same here on the other side. I'm going to just shade that a little bit in there too. And I'm going to run this roof down here. And I'm going to go to a fan brush to get this top section in. It comes up here like so, and then it comes down like so. And if you use a fan brush to run this in, then it looks as if it's a type of thatched roof or palm frond type roof. Also, if you just put a dividing line here where it's been tied down and a little bit across here, it looks much more natural. It's about all we need. And well, we have a tissue problem here. It's got it, and we need to just get a little bit of vegetation around the bottom of it here, and we'll come back and put a doorway in. Use this small knife again to run a doorway in about here, and of course a window. Don't go to a lot of trouble. The rougher you get this, the better it will look. We'll just take the worst of that off there, and we'll put another window perhaps in here somewhere. Now we need to run a little track across here, so I'm going to use a little burnt sienna to initially get the track in and run it over to the doorway. And you need to have the track nice and wide in the foreground. Very important that you get it nice and wide in the foreground and narrow when it gets right up to the building itself. And around the side here, we need to get heaps of grass and rubbish in. Texture in the ground is terribly important. Now, generally speaking, as you go back into the distance, the texture of the ground will get lighter and shorter and finer. So I'm going to a little bit of cad yellow there in the distance. It's nice and dark here, and it's getting very light in the background. Just work along that little path there, and in the foreground here I'm going to darken it up even more. You can, in fact, if you want to, take something like a bit of burnt umber and burnt sienna and put it on with a knife. It gives a really marvellous rough effect in the foreground, and let it fade away into the distance as it gets up towards the building. And I'm going to put just the tiniest little bit of white here and lighten it as it goes up. The same with this track. What we want to do is we want to get it lighter as it disappears towards the building in exactly the same manner as we do with the ground. We have the ground getting lighter in texture as it disappears, and the same with that track. We want it getting nice and light. I'm going to run a little bit of burnt sienna grass in here and creep across here with a little bit of the green, and I'm going to deliberately put a little bit of this green grass in at random along the track and just bring out a little bit of shadow into the track itself. And on both sides you can do that. As we run back again, we need to lighten it up a bit and get a little bit of this yellow in. Then go to a pale green. Could be a little shorter there, but that's going well. That's about what we need. Now that we're getting that ground in though, I feel that we could come back here and lighten some of these trees a little more. And even with this big tree here, I feel that we could push the colour a little more with that as well. And we could use just a tiny bit of orange within these trees here to lighten them up a bit. And a little bit of yellow-green right on top of this guy. And again, if you want to have some very fine branches coming out of some of these things, you can use a little. This brush is actually half worn out, and it's only got about half a dozen hairs in, but absolutely ideal for this sort of thing. You can run away these little fine branches that are as thin as a hair almost, and how easy it is to put it in when you have such a fine brush. Now, we could have a fence post in here, and I'm going to put in, just bear in mind that with fence posts, you don't have anything to compare the post with when you are down in this area here. But when you get up here towards the house, you certainly do have the house to compare it with. And these posts would not be any higher than halfway up the wall of that house. So just bear in mind. Now I'm going to scratch this wire in, and you may note that I've taken it almost from the centre of that post, and I've gone to the top of the end one on the right hand side, and also I'm heading for the bottom of the post on the end ones, the top and the bottom of the posts on the end ones, to exaggerate the perspective. I'm going to pull a little bit of shadow away here from a few of them. You don't have to do every one, but just get a bit of shadow here and there on them. And I'm going to take a little bit of that pink again. We've run out of it, so we've got to mix it up. A little bit of white, red and orange, and I'm going to just get a little bit of highlight on the side of these guys. But you know, I see a lot of students really trying very hard to get these posts all perfectly lined up and goodness knows what, but believe me, the rougher you put these posts in, the better they will look. I'm going to just very quickly mix up a little more of that orange and Payne's grey, and we can run up a few little stems here and take a bit of that red. We can put a few flowers in here. How easy is that? Don't ask me what kind of flower it is. Someone is sure to ring me up and say, well, what kind of flower was it? Well, it could be a rose. Do they have blue roses? And we need to highlight. It makes a very big difference with all flowers if you just get a tiny bit of highlight on them here and there. Whether they're outdoors like this or indoors or creepers or whatever, that little bit of highlight makes one very big difference to them. Well, I'm going to sign the painting down in the right hand corner, and that shadow's just a little bit sharp there, so we'll dampen him down a little bit. I'm going to sign it down here in the right hand corner, and we'll put a frame around it and see how it looks. And there we go. Well, again, that's a really easy little painting to have a go at. There's nothing terribly difficult about it. There's not much perspective involved in the building. A fan brush will give you that straw sort of look on the roof, and make sure you have the little path going to a point in the distance, or almost to a point, and getting nice and wide in the foreground. The posts large here and going to very small ones in the distance, and leave a few holes for the birds to fly through in the trees, and you'll enjoy your painting. Remember, the first brush stroke's always the hardest, and the last one's the most satisfying. Enjoy your painting. Bye.